I'm Corbett Wall with USDA Livestock and Grain Market News, here with your weekly feeder and stocker cattle market summary for the week ending May the 11th. For most of your feeder cattle and calves sold steady to $4 higher and largely $2 to $4 higher, especially on your load lots of yearlings in the auction markets. Most of your direct trade on your 7 and 8 weight steers and on popular weights of calves in your major auction markets across the United States. So a lot of gains we're seeing this week. You know, we're seasonally getting into lighter and lighter runs, and we're really tailing off fast. But this week we did have some decent offerings in some major auction markets, especially because we had some pretty good rains throughout the Midwest over the last weekend, which allowed your guys at Farm and Ranch 2 an opportunity to get out of the field and get some cattle put together and hauled into town. So we did have some decent offerings in some of your major auction markets. Both your major auctions near Oklahoma City there, Oklahoma National Stockyards and OKC West had big runs, had some good runs down there in southern part of Kansas, and the buyers got pretty aggressive on those cattle because they know that it's not going to happen much longer. It's not going to take very many cattle to draw a crowd here over the next several weeks, and just runs are going to be extremely short. Going to have a hard time putting any loads together. Any load lots of yearlings are going to be really scarce. So the buyers really jumped in there this week trying to fill some orders and get some cattle bought. Now the runs are going to get so light, and a lot of these cattle producers are hoping that the light availability of feeder cattle will kind of pick up the interest in them a little bit more, and maybe spark the board a little bit before we get into these June sales, which there's not going to be any spot sales and right there in the auction sales, but June has big video sales. All your major video markets are going to have big specials. So a lot of those late summer yearlings, those fall calves are going to be priced off those videos, and they're really hoping for a good charge in this board so that these buyers will have something to hedge those cattle off of, and just really tight numbers are going to embolden that market a whole lot more when they have those sales. And along with those video sales, you're going to get a lot of country private treaty sales too. So a big percentage of this late summer and fall cattle will be priced during June. But one thing that could really help boost the market on these is this corn. And everybody that's driven throughout the Midwest and in the Corn Belt knows that they planted a lot of corn this year. And USDA supply and demand report come out this week on Thursday. Indeed, they're forecasting the largest corn crop ever, expecting it to be fully 20% larger than last year, which is huge. And on that 20% larger, they're expecting 5.1 million more acres planted. That's over 6% increase over last year. They're expecting the yields on them to be 20 bushels per acre larger, which would be a 12.8% increase. So if we realize this big corn crop, it will absolutely be huge. But you know, a lot of pastures been plowed up and put corn in there. A lot of guys that normally alternate corn and beans have went corn to corn this year. Just a lot of corn planted. So you'd think that might be a big boost to the beans, but our wheat has matured so fast this year that in many areas, especially in Kansas there, this wheat harvest is already full swing, full bore. I mean, coming right up north through Kansas there, northern Oklahoma. And so they'll get that wheat out of there. They'll come right back in there with beans. And we're going to have a lot of grain production this year if the rains hold out. And they're talking about El Nino being over. We're getting some rains in places that really need them. You know, here late in the week, you know, the Texas Panhandle, eastern New Mexico, parts of West Texas are getting rains, which is great. There's no flooding problem even when you get up in the upper Midwest, so that's great. So if we could just kind of keep some rains coming, timely rains throughout those grazing regions and in the southern plains there where they do the farming, should be a lot of production. The fat trade was real slow to develop this week. Here late Friday, at the other side of the office, they're trying to gather up sales, getting a little bit of northern feedlot sales to the majors, dressed at 142, some of the regionals from 143 and 144. Not a whole lot of live trade to speak of. We do have sound 119 bids, but it's probably going to take at least $1.20 to trade, and as soon as I say that, they'll probably sell out at 119. But that's where they're at late Friday afternoon. I've got to get this out sometime or another. We've got record high for this time of year carcass weights. Could be one thing that's kind of keeping these cutout values back a little bit. Still got decent beef production, but I tell you, out back east there's still demand for beef in places you might think that demand's not that great. But last Saturday in Vermont at the 21st annual Vermont Beef Producers Spring Feeder Cattle Auction, had a lot of buyers on the seats there, probably more buyers than cattle, and those buyers are looking for cattle for a niche market. A lot of those guys feed those cattle themselves and market the beef themselves. Some of them more so interested in grass-fed product. But adding those cattle all up, I know it's a light run, but a cumulative load put together of yearling steers and heifers, and these cattle are commingled, sold off in weights. And the steers and heifers both, the yearling cattle averaged 739 pounds and 159.87. So that's huge. That's in New England. And people still eat beef out that way, whether you believe it or not. But regional weighted averages this week in the north central states. This week's 800 to 900 pound steers in the north central states brought 143.44 compared to 142.39 last week and 128.13 a year ago. Down in the south central states, including Missouri, 7 to 8 weight steers averaged 149.62 compared to 147.65 last week and 129.95 a year ago. And down in the southeast, a 500 to 600 pound steer cost you 167.38 compared to 164.16 last week and 133.34 a year ago. That wraps up your market for this week. Check out our website for more market information at marketnews.usda.gov. From the Regional Market News Office in St. Joe, Missouri, we'll talk to you next week.